Warning. This video is short and sweet when it comes to information. If you are looking to do some real research on World War II, I highly encourage you to check better, more viable sources. Source? Trust me, bro. It is 1919, or to be more specific, June 28th, 1919. And the First World War is over. Germany and the Allied powers signed the Treaty of Versailles in Paris, officially and formally ending the war. The treaty essentially blamed Germany for the war, and also called for Germany to demilitarize and make reparations, or pay back money to other countries, like France, Britain, and the United States. It also made them drop their territory and colonies. Now, surely, Germany will follow all of these terms because Germany would never break any rules. I mean, who would think to try and start another bloody war, resulting in millions dying? The League of Nations were created in the earliest part of the beginning of the 1920s in the year 1920 itself. It had 4 permanent members: Italy, the United Kingdom, France, and Japan. It was made to avoid another world war and handle international disputes. This, as you'll see later on, is not going to go exactly as planned. Now, before we continue, there's a few things we have to go over. Racism. Ever heard of it? Well, it actually had a large part in World War II. Anti-Semitism is a form of racism and is discrimination or prejudice against Jewish people. Sometimes I just think of Hitler as the biggest racist of all time. But keep this in your head because it's going to come back soon. Another thing is the use of propaganda in the war. Both Germany and the US used propaganda in World War II. The US using propaganda to make the public behind the war effort, supporting it full-heartedly. Britain used it to encourage food production and other military supporting efforts. And Germany, of course, making themselves look stronger compared to the militaries of Britain, the US, and the USSR, whom we will talk about more in a bit. How do you pronounce this? Okay. The Blitzkrieg was a military strategy that means lightning war, and was responsible for German victories early in the war. It is an offensive strategy where they use tanks and other artillery to create an overwhelming local superiority in power and break through the enemy defenses. It was meant to bring a swift end to the war, a war that would last slightly over half a decade. Okay, so, 1931. Japan invades Manchuria immediately after the Mukden incident, which we won't be discussing. Now, the reason why Japan did this was because they needed raw material to fuel production in its growing industries. The thing is, Manchuria was rich in natural resources, and of course, that's the exact thing Japan was looking for. In January of 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor by von Hindenburg. This helps Hitler and the Nazi Party start rising and gaining more power. Politically, still, the Nazi Party was still in the minority in terms of popularity. However, a month later came the Reichstag fire. They claimed the fire was part of a plan to take over the government by communists. With Nazi propaganda spreading fear that there would be a communist revolt, Hitler used this fire as an opportunity to gain more power. Just a little less than a month later, they passed the Enabling Act, which essentially gave power to the Nazis. As much as we all hate Hitler, you have to admit he was smart in some ways, morally in none. On the night of August 23rd to the 24th, Germany and the Soviet Union made a pact, to which they pledged not to attack each other for 10 years and to split the countries between the two in secret. This was called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Okay, well, here we are, the invasion of Poland. Here we go. September 1st, 1939. Hitler began his invasion of Poland because he wanted Germans living there. On Poland's end, they set the majority of their forces west so that they could defend against the Germans while waiting upon the arrival of the French and British forces. This is the start of World War II. I think we've all seen photos of Hitler in Paris, so I think you can see where this is going. The occupation of France. Well, more so the invasion in its first stages. 1940. Germany took control of Paris on June 14th and had fought the British since May 10th. This was known as the Battle of France or the Fall of France. Perhaps the most well-known event in the war, at least to the US. One and all, I introduce you to Pearl Harbor. This was a Japanese aerial attack upon Pearl Harbor and cements itself into American history as a terrible attack. They destroyed multiple ships and killed around 2,400 servicemen. If this attack was prompted to make America surrender or negotiate peace, it failed. This time, it wasn't Germany prompting the US to join a war, but still involved ships. Now the war has gained momentum. The US pushed to fight. Japanese in America forced to relocate in fear of espionage. A town near Detroit built to house factory workers. Rosie the Riveter, a character who empowers women in American factories, and multinational rationing in both Britain and the US, and millions imprisoned. African Americans in their own air regiment segregated, known as the Tuskegee Airmen. Tensions are high. Stakes are higher. Here's the part nobody can forget, and we simply can't just skim past this. This is the Holocaust. Don't act like it didn't happen, because it did. I'm sure we are all well aware of this heinous crime that took place. Jews and others, for other reasons, were deported and put into concentration camps to be killed. This took place for 3 years, until 1945, when Hitler was defeated. Millions died. Perhaps one of the media's favorite parts of the war, D-Day. This battle was the storming of Normandy beaches by boat and by air. On the first day, there were 3 U.S. divisions, 2 British, and 1 Canadian. More British and U.S. divisions came through after the assault division cleared the way. Battle of the Bulge. This battle was an offensive German attack. The Germans made a surprise attack in the Ardennes region, I hope I'm saying that correctly, which was heavily forested against the Allies and was one of the last Nazi victories in the war. This battle turned out to be one of the largest and bloodiest battles of World War II. Now I'm sure everybody has heard of this as well. To call this payback for Pearl Harbor might be a little extreme considering the incredible loss of life, but America got its revenge. On August 6th, the US dropped the first of 2 atomic bombs approved by Harry Truman in order to get Japan out of the war. This bomb, named Little Boy, killed an estimated 140,000 people. Just 3 days later, they dropped the bomb named Fat Man on Nagasaki, which resulted in around 60,000 total injured and dead. On May 8th, 1945, Germany finally surrendered. The days prior, bit of army surrendered one by one until the whole regime fell, ending World War II in Europe. With Hitler dead, the world settled smoothly. Emperor Hirohito of Japan declares Japan's surrender on the 15th of August and is officially signed on September 2nd, 1945. The speeding world has finally come to a halt. The end of another world war has been finalized. In 1945, 50 different countries came to California, and in October the United Nations were created, also known as the UN. This is basically a better and more different League of Nations, which will hopefully prevent another world war. Around the end of the World War II, about a year later, Nazi generals and anyone who supported the regime was tried in the Nuremberg trials. Unfortunately, these trials only focused on Nazis because nobody else did some overboard tactics. America. Still, nonetheless, anyone and everyone who committed war crimes and disturbing world peace were tried. Imperialism and colonialism had a sort of stigmatism to them after the war. Any countries that were colonies were given independence and were recognized. Over 3 dozen countries were created from this. Also occurring after the war, many military members came back and were ready to settle down. This resulted in what is known as the baby boom, where birth rates were high. After the war, everything seemed to go well. Things actually improved. The US, being the US, and the USSR started developing nuclear weapons. Wait, what? The USSR started manufacturing bombs? Oh, well, okay. With Russia's development of creating nuclear bombs, it became another world superpower. But now after the war, tensions were rising. Communism was slowly creeping, and the Soviet Union seemed more like a threat. They started the construction of the Berlin Wall to keep out communism. War started to seem almost imminent again. Almost like an unlit powder keg next to a flame. If one ember were to light it, the world would go into another world war.